The morning sun filtered through the courthouse's towering windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor as Maya Thompson hurried through the security checkpoint. Her fingers still carried the faint scent of fresh herbs and truffle oil from her pre-dawn recipe testing session. The security guard raised an eyebrow at her flour-dusted jeans and simple black t-shirt, a stark contrast to the suits and formal attire that typically filled these halls. Maya's hand instinctively reached for her chef's notebook, its pages stuffed with hastily scribbled recipes and wine pairings for her upcoming tasting menu. She'd spent the entire night perfecting a new dish, a delicate balance of French technique and West African flavors that had taken months to develop. The parking ticket crumpled slightly in her other hand, a reminder of why she stood here instead of continuing her work at the restaurant. As she entered courtroom 4B, the quiet murmur of conversation died down. Several heads turned to watch her make her way down the aisle. Maya held her chin high, immune to the scrutiny after years of being the only woman, let alone person of color, in many high-end kitchens. Her comfortable shoes, perfect for 12-hour shifts on kitchen tiles, squeaked slightly against the floor's pristine surface. Judge Harrison Wells sat elevated behind his massive oak desk, his steel-rimmed glasses reflecting the morning light as he reviewed the docket before him. His eyes flickered up briefly as Maya approached the defendant's position, then returned to his papers with a slight frown. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her casual attire, how his lips pursed ever so slightly at her appearance. Case number 247, the clerk announced, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Maya Thompson, parking violation in a commercial loading zone. Maya stepped forward, her posture naturally straight from years of kitchen discipline. She could feel Judge Wells's assessing gaze, watching as she arranged her documentation on the small podium before her. Her hands moved with the same precision she used when plating a delicate soufflé. Ms. Thompson, Judge Wells began, his tone carrying that particular edge she'd heard countless times before. The voice of someone who had already made assumptions. I see this incident occurred at 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. Rather late to be parked in a loading zone, wouldn't you say? The corner of Maya's mouth twitched slightly. In her world, the world of fine dining and Michelin stars, 11:45 p.m. was practically early evening. She opened her mouth to explain about the emergency delivery of white truffles, flown in directly from Alba, Italy. The shipment had been worth more than most people's monthly salary, and she hadn't trusted anyone else to verify their quality. But Judge Wells was already speaking again, his tone carrying the weight of authority and something else, a dismissiveness that made Maya's shoulders tighten ever so slightly. She remained silent, her fingers trailing over the edge of her notebook where inside, between recipes and prep lists, lay proof of her success. Press clippings, reviews, and a letter announcing her latest James Beard Award nomination. The morning light continued to stream through the windows, illuminating particles of flour that had shaken loose from her clothes. To anyone else, they might have looked like dust, but to Maya, they were badges of honor. Evidence of another night spent pursuing excellence in her craft, regardless of what anyone else might see when they looked at her. Judge Wells shuffled through the papers before him, barely glancing at Maya's prepared documentation. The morning courtroom buzzed with a nervous energy as other attendees sensed the growing tension. A law clerk in the corner stopped typing, her fingers hovering over her keyboard as she watched the scene unfold. Miss Thompson, Judge Wells continued, removing his glasses and fixing her with a stern look. Perhaps you're unaware, but loading zones serve a vital purpose for local businesses. They're not convenient parking spots for late-night activities. Maya took a measured breath, the same way she did when training new chefs who accidentally oversalted a delicate sauce. Your Honor, if I may explain, she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that commanded respect in her kitchen. I was accepting a time-sensitive delivery of imported ingredients. Everyone has their reasons, Miss Thompson. The judge interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. I've heard every excuse, from medical emergencies to forgotten anniversaries. The law exists for a reason. The irony of his words almost made Maya smile. Through the tall courthouse windows, she could actually see her restaurant, the Golden Spatula, its gold-lettered sign gleaming in the morning sun. The same restaurant that food critics called revolutionary and a triumph of modern cuisine. The same establishment that had earned her features in prestigious magazines and a waitlist months long. A young attorney in the gallery leaned forward, squinting at Maya with growing recognition. She'd seen that look before, the gradual realization that the woman in flour-dusted jeans was the same chef whose tasting menu he probably waited months to experience. "Your Honor," Maya tried again, reaching for the shipping manifest in her notebook. The delivery in question was a shipment of Alba white truffles, valued at "Ms. Thompson." Judge Wells cut in sharply, his voice carrying an edge that silenced the entire courtroom. "The value of whatever you were picking up is irrelevant. The sign clearly states commercial loading only, unless you represent a legitimate business." The young attorney in the gallery suddenly coughed, loudly and deliberately. Judge Wells shot him an irritated glance, but Maya noticed how the attorney's eyes had widened with recognition. He was now frantically typing something on his phone, probably looking up her latest press coverage or the glowing review from last month's Food and Wine magazine. Maya straightened her shoulders, her kitchen-hardened posture impeccable. She'd stood before tougher critics, worked harder stations, and overcome far greater obstacles than this misunderstanding. The weight of her achievements sat comfortably on her shoulders, even if they weren't visible beneath her casual attire. "Your Honor," she began one final time, her voice carrying the same calm authority she used when expediting during a busy service. "I am the owner and executive chef-off." "That will be enough," Judge Wells declared, reaching for his gavel. "Given your apparent lack of regard for local business operations, I'm setting the fine at the maximum amount. Perhaps this will serve as a reminder about respecting commercial zones and the businesses that depend on them." Maya's expression remained neutral, years of kitchen discipline serving her well. She noticed the young attorney shaking his head in disbelief, the law clerk's mouth slightly agape, and the subtle murmur of disapproval rippling through the gallery. But she simply nodded, accepting the fine with the same grace she accepted every challenge in her career. After all, she had a new tasting menu to perfect, a kitchen staff to lead, and a fully booked evening service to prepare for. This was merely another ingredient in the complex dish that was her journey. Maya withdrew her leather wallet from her back pocket, its worn edges telling stories of late-night supply runs and early morning market visits. With practiced precision, the same she used when plating her signature dishes, she counted out the fine amount. Each bill was placed on the clerk's desk with the deliberate care of someone who understood both the value of money and the importance of presentation. The young attorney who had recognized her earlier now stood near the courtroom doors, phone pressed to his ear as he whispered urgently to someone. Maya caught fragments of his conversation. "Yes, that's Chef Thompson. No, you won't believe." She allowed herself a small smile, the kind she reserved for perfect plates leaving her kitchen. Judge Wells was already shuffling papers for the next case, his attention shifting away from what he clearly considered a routine matter. He paused only briefly to add a final comment. "I hope this serves as a lesson about proper business procedures, Miss Thompson." Maya smoothed her flour-dusted shirt, a light coating of the finest Italian 00 flour she'd been testing for her new pasta dish before rushing to court. "Indeed, Your Honor," she replied, her voice carrying the same steady authority she used in her kitchen during a busy Saturday service. "Every experience teaches us something valuable." The law clerk, still watching the scene intently, dropped her pen. The sound echoed through the courtroom as Maya gathered her chef's notebook. A receipt from her latest Michelin-Starred review slipped partially out, the gold star visible to anyone paying attention. The clerk's eyes widened as she caught sight of it, her hand flying to cover her mouth in recognition. As Maya turned to leave, she noticed more people in the gallery checking their phones, their expressions shifting from indifference to surprise. Her restaurant's afternoon reservation notifications were probably starting to ping on their devices, the exclusive bookings that were nearly impossible to secure without months of waiting. She walked down the center aisle with the same measured pace she used when visiting dining room tables, acknowledging the subtle nods of recognition from those who had finally placed her face. Her mind was already shifting to the evening service, the new seasonal menu she needed to finalize, the wine pairings to perfect, the staff briefing to conduct. At the doorway, she paused to check her watch, a simple, elegant timepiece that had been a gift from her mentor after her first Michelin star. She had exactly 4 hours before her kitchen team would arrive, expecting their leader to guide them through another evening of culinary excellence. The young attorney held the door for her, practically bouncing with barely contained excitement. "Chef Thompson," he whispered, "my wife and I celebrated our anniversary at your restaurant last month. The squab with fermented black garlic was life-changing." Maya thanked him with a genuine smile, the kind that her regular guests treasured as much as her signature dishes. As she stepped into the courthouse hallway, she heard the attorney rush back into the courtroom, no doubt eager to watch Judge Wells's eventual realization of his mistake. But Maya wouldn't be there to see it. She had more important matters to attend to, a kitchen to command, a team to lead, and new culinary boundaries to push. After all, excellence wasn't achieved by dwelling on misunderstandings, but by continuously moving forward, creating, and elevating one's craft. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sous chef about the evening's special imports. Maya's steps quickened slightly, her mind already crafting new dishes as she headed back to her true domain, where her authority wasn't questioned, and her expertise spoke for itself through every plate that left her kitchen. That evening, Judge Harrison Wells adjusted his silk tie as he and his wife Elizabeth stepped through the gleaming doors of the Golden Spatula. The hostess's eyes sparkled with practiced warmth as she greeted them. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Wells. We've been expecting you." The restaurant's interior was a masterpiece of understated elegance. Soft amber lighting caught the edges of hand-blown glass fixtures, while tables draped in crisp white linens dotted the space like islands of intimacy. The gentle murmur of satisfied diners mixed with the subtle classical music playing overhead. "Harrison, I can't believe you managed to get reservations here," Elizabeth whispered excitedly as they followed the hostess. "Sarah at the club said she's been trying for months." She clutched his arm, taking in the carefully curated atmosphere that had earned the restaurant its stellar reputation. The maitre d', Thomas, appeared as if summoned by their arrival. His tailored black suit and impeccable posture spoke of years of fine dining expertise. "Judge Wells, Mrs. Wells, we're honored to have you joining us tonight. Chef Thompson personally selected your table when she heard about your reservation." Something tickled at the edge of Judge Wells's memory at the mention of the name, but he dismissed it. The day's cases had already begun to blur together in his mind. He was more focused on the enviable looks from other diners as Thomas led them to what was clearly one of the best tables in the house, a corner spot with a perfect view of both the open kitchen and the city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Chef has prepared a special tasting menu for you this evening," Thomas explained as he held Elizabeth's chair. "She insisted on showcasing our signature dishes along with some new creations she's been perfecting." Elizabeth practically glowed with excitement. "A special menu? Harrison, how did you manage this?" Before he could respond, a sommelier approached with a bottle of vintage champagne, its label making Judge Wells's eyebrows rise. "Compliments of Chef Thompson," the sommelier announced, presenting the bottle. "She said this particular vintage deserves to be appreciated by someone with refined taste." As the champagne was being poured, movement in the open kitchen caught Judge Wells's attention. Chefs in pristine whites moved with military precision, each focused intently on their tasks. At the center of this culinary choreography stood a familiar figure, though in a very different context than earlier that day. Maya Thompson, now dressed in immaculate chef's whites with her name and title embroidered in gold thread, commanded her kitchen with quiet authority. Gone were the flour-dusted jeans and casual shirt. In their place was the uniform of a culinary master, complete with the traditional toque that marked her status. The color drained from Judge Wells's face as recognition dawned. He watched as she inspected a plate with laser focus, adjusting a microgreen with tweezers before nodding her approval. The dish disappeared into the dining room, followed by the subtle sounds of delight from nearby diners. "Darling." Elizabeth touched his hand, concerned by his sudden pallor. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," he managed to reply, his throat suddenly dry. "Just a reminder that appearances can be deceiving." Through the kitchen window, Maya glanced up, meeting his eyes for just a moment. The slight smile that crossed her lips carried no malice, no resentment, only the confidence of someone who had proven their worth 1,000 times over, one perfect plate at a time. Through the expansive kitchen window, Judge Wells watched Maya Thompson orchestrate her culinary symphony. Her movements were precise and purposeful as she inspected each plate, her standards evident in every careful gesture. The kitchen staff moved around her with a coordinated grace that spoke of countless hours of practice and unwavering discipline. "The first course," announced Thomas, appearing tableside with practiced timing, "is Chef Thompson's interpretation of a classic French dish that earned her first Michelin star. She calls it Memory of Paris." The plate before them was a work of art, a delicate arrangement of butter-poached lobster, its flesh practically translucent, nestled among tiny vegetables that looked as if they'd been harvested from a fairy garden. A sauce, poured tableside, flowed like liquid gold around the composition. Elizabeth gasped softly at the presentation. "It's beautiful," she whispered, reaching for her phone to capture the moment. In the kitchen, Maya was now demonstrating a technique to a young chef, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who had performed the same motion thousands of times. "Chef Thompson trained under Joel Robuchon in Paris," Thomas explained, noting their interest in the kitchen's activities. She was the youngest chef to earn his personal mentorship. The techniques she learned there formed the foundation of her innovative approach to modern cuisine. Judge Wells's fork hesitated above the dish as he processed this information. He remembered her earlier attempt to explain about the truffle delivery, how he'd dismissed her words without a second thought. Now, watching her taste and adjust seasonings with the precision of a master craftsman, her dedication to her craft was undeniable. Through the window, they could see Maya reviewing plates with her sous chef. She pointed to something on a dish, demonstrating a minute adjustment that transformed the presentation from excellent to perfect. Her team responded to her directions instantly, their respect evident in every interaction. "The sauce," Elizabeth remarked after her first bite, "it's incredible. I've never tasted anything like it." Chef Thompson spent 3 months perfecting that recipe, Thomas shared. She sources the butter from a small farm in Normandy and infuses it with herbs grown in our rooftop garden. Each batch takes 3 days to prepare. In the kitchen, Maya was now carefully plating their next course. Her focus was absolute as she positioned each element with tweezers, stepping back occasionally to view the composition from different angles. Judge Wells couldn't help but notice how every chef in the kitchen seemed to orbit around her, like planets around a sun, their movements synchronized to her rhythm. A food critic from a national magazine occupied a nearby table, frantically taking notes as each course arrived. Chef Thompson's technique is unparalleled, they overheard him telling his companion. The way she balances classical French techniques with modern innovation. It's why there's a 6-month waiting list for reservations. Maya looked up from her work, surveying her domain with quiet confidence. She caught Judge Wells's eye for a moment, offering a small nod of acknowledgement before returning to her craft. In that brief exchange, he saw not the casual woman from his courtroom, but a master of her profession, someone who had earned every accolade through years of dedication and excellence. "I heard she's opening a cooking school for underprivileged youth next month," whispered a diner at the next table. "Even with running this restaurant and her television appearances, she still makes time to give back to the community." Judge Wells set down his fork, the weight of his morning's assumptions sitting heavily on his conscience. Here was excellence personified, dedication made manifest in every perfect plate that left the kitchen, and he had never been more wrong about someone in his life. Between courses, Judge Wells found himself unable to focus on his wife's delighted commentary about the meal. His eyes kept returning to the kitchen, where Maya moved with the confidence of a conductor leading a world-class orchestra. Each plate that left her station told a story of passion, precision, and years of dedicated practice. "Your next course," Thomas announced, presenting 2 artfully arranged plates, "is Chef Thompson's signature dish, a study in texture and temperature that earned her feature in Le Mans Culinary Edition. She calls it Autumn Memories." The dish was a masterpiece of composition, a perfect circle of seared duck breast, its skin crystallized to golden perfection, surrounded by tiny seasonal vegetables, each treated with individual care. A warm sauce, poured with theatrical precision, caused edible flowers to slowly open their petals, transforming the plate into a living canvas. "This is extraordinary," Elizabeth breathed, watching the dish come alive before her eyes. "Harrison, have you ever seen anything like this?" But Judge Wells was lost in thought, remembering Maya's composed demeanor in his courtroom just hours ago. He recalled how she tried to explain about the delivery, how he cut her off with practiced authority. Now, watching her inspect each plate with exacting standards, he understood the weight of his misjudgment. Through the kitchen window, he observed as Maya mentored a young apprentice, demonstrating a complex plating technique with patient precision. Her explaining gestures were kind but firm, the same hands that had carefully counted out the fine money now creating culinary art worth hundreds of dollars per plate. Chef Thompson personally trains every member of her kitchen staff, Thomas shared, noticing the judge's attention. She offers apprenticeships to talented young chefs who might not otherwise have access to fine dining experience. 3 of her former apprentices now run Michelin-Starred restaurants of their own. A food runner hurried past their table, carrying Maya's newest creation to another guest. The perfume of fresh truffles, the very ingredient she'd been accepting during the parking violation, wafted through the air, each shaving worth more than the fine he'd imposed. Judge Wells watched as Maya tasted a sauce, considered it thoughtfully, then added the smallest pinch of seasoning. Her attention to detail, her pursuit of perfection, her leadership, everything about her commanded respect. And he had failed to see any of it, blinded by assumptions he now found painfully embarrassing. The wine pairing for this course, the sommelier appeared, presenting a bottle, was personally selected by Chef Thompson from our cellar. She believed it would complement both the dish and the occasion perfectly. Elizabeth sipped the wine with appreciation, but Judge Wells could barely bring himself to lift the glass. Each moment in the restaurant added another layer to his understanding of the accomplished professional he had so casually dismissed. Through the window, he watched as Maya reviewed tomorrow's menu with her sous chef. Her notebook, the same one she'd held in court, now open to reveal detailed sketches of plating designs and careful notes about flavor combinations. Her dedication to her craft was evident in every gesture, every decision, every perfect plate that left her kitchen. The weight of his morning's behavior sat heavily on his shoulders as he observed Maya in her element, commanding respect not through authority granted by position, but through excellence earned by years of dedication and skill. Here was true mastery, and he had been too quick to judge its cover. As the final dessert plates were cleared away, Judge Wells stood from his table with careful deliberation. Elizabeth had excused herself to the powder room, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the weight of the evening's revelations. Through the restaurant's ambient lighting, he could see Maya in her office, reviewing documents with the same focused attention she gave her culinary creations. "Is Chef Thompson available for a moment?" he asked Thomas quietly. The maitre d' gave him a knowing look, one that suggested he wasn't the first diner to request an audience with the celebrated chef. However, this meeting carried different intentions. Maya's office reflected her personality, organized yet creative, with framed awards sharing wall space with handwritten thank you notes from aspiring chefs she'd mentored. She looked up as he entered, her chef's whites pristine, Even after a full evening of service, her posture as dignified as it had been in his courtroom. "Your Honor," she greeted him, setting aside what he now recognized as order forms for those precious truffles that had started this whole situation. "I trust you enjoyed your dinner." "Miss Thompson, Chef Thompson," he corrected himself, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of humility. "The meal was extraordinary, but that's not why I'm here." Maya gestured to a chair, her movements as graceful in this setting as they were in her kitchen. The distant sounds of the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of satisfied conversations, created a gentle backdrop to this moment of truth. "I owe you an apology," Judge Wells began, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Not just for this morning's misunderstanding, but for something far more fundamental. I failed to see beyond my own preconceptions." Maya listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. On her desk, a new set of menu designs showed the same careful attention to detail he'd witnessed throughout the evening. Each element considered, each combination purposeful. "You tried to explain about the delivery," he continued, "and I wouldn't listen. I spent years behind that bench, presumably serving justice, but today I failed to exhibit the very fairness I'm sworn to uphold." A gentle smile touched Maya's lips as she reached for her chef's notebook, the same one she'd held in court. She opened it to reveal not just recipes, but detailed business plans, charitable initiative proposals, and employee development programs. "Your Honor," she responded, her voice carrying the same quiet confidence it had that morning. "In my kitchen, we have a saying: mistakes are ingredients for growth. What matters isn't the initial error, but how we learn from it." The judge's shoulders relaxed slightly at her words. Through her office window, they could see her team efficiently preparing for tomorrow, each member moving with purpose and pride. "The truffles you were accepting that night," he said, gesturing to the order forms on her desk. "They were for the dish we had this evening, weren't they?" Maya nodded, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "The very same. In fine dining, timing is everything. Sometimes that means being present for midnight deliveries, even if it means appearing in court the next morning in less than formal attire." Judge Wells shook his head, a mixture of admiration and regret crossing his features. "You've built something remarkable here, Chef Thompson. Not just the restaurant, but the opportunities you're creating for others. I'd like to make amends, perhaps by supporting your mentorship program." "Justice," Maya replied thoughtfully, "like cooking, is about balance. Your support would be welcome, not as amends, but as part of creating something positive together." As they spoke, the evening service wound down beyond the office walls, but the real transformation was happening right there. A bridge being built between two professionals who had moved beyond first impressions to find common ground in their pursuit of excellence. 6 months later, the courthouse buzzed with unusual energy. The typical morning routine had been transformed by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and artisanal pastries. In courtroom 4B, now renovated with a demonstration kitchen at the back, Maya Thompson stood beside Judge Wells, both addressing a group of eager young culinary students. "Welcome to the first graduation ceremony of the Golden Opportunity Culinary Program," Judge Wells announced, his voice carrying the warmth of genuine pride. The students, dressed in crisp white chef's jackets, sat attentively in the jury box, a deliberate symbol of how justice and opportunity could work hand in hand. Maya stepped forward, her chef's whites adorned with the program's golden emblem, a scales of justice cleverly incorporated into a chef's knife design. 6 months ago, an unexpected morning in this very courtroom led to something extraordinary. She began, sharing a knowing glance with the judge. The program they'd created together had transformed lives. Judge Wells had provided the legal framework and courthouse space, while Maya brought her culinary expertise and industry connections. Together, they'd established a pathway for young people who found themselves in the court system to redirect their lives through culinary training. Today, each of you has proven that with the right opportunity and dedication, excellence is achievable. Maya continued, Gesturing to the impressive spread of dishes, the students had prepared for their final examination. The courthouse staff had been more than willing to serve as taste testers, and the reviews were glowing. Judge Wells watched as Maya presented each graduate with their certification. Documents that carried the weight of both culinary achievement and judicial support. He remembered how his own prejudices had nearly prevented this collaboration, how a simple parking ticket had led to a profound lesson in looking beyond appearances. Chef Thompson's guidance has been invaluable, shared one graduate, a young woman who had once stood before Judge Wells for a minor offense. She taught us that precision in the kitchen requires the same discipline as making good life choices. Now I'm starting as a line cook at the Golden Spatula next week. The local press covered the event, capturing images of Maya demonstrating advanced techniques in the courtroom-turned-teaching kitchen. The story would later run under the headline, "From Judgment to Opportunity: How a Chef and Judge Cooked Up Justice." As the ceremony concluded, Judge Wells observed Maya chatting with the graduates, offering personalized advice and professional connections to each. Her restaurant had become a beacon of second chances, with several graduates already working their way up through her kitchen ranks. "Your Honor," Maya called, beckoning him over to taste a particularly impressive dessert created by one of the graduates. "I believe this merits your expert judgment." The courthouse staff gathered around, watching as the judge sampled the dish with the same careful consideration he now gave to every case before him. His perspective had shifted. He'd learned to look deeper, to seek understanding before passing judgment. "The verdict is excellence," he declared, drawing laughs from the gathered crowd. Later, as they watched the graduates celebrating with their families, Maya opened her well-worn notebook. Inside, alongside her recipes and business plans, was a new section dedicated to expanding the program to other courthouses across the city. "You know," Judge Wells mused, reviewing the expansion plans, "sometimes the most important cases don't actually involve any laws being broken." Maya smiled, remembering that morning 6 months ago. "And sometimes," she added, "the finest recipes come from unexpected ingredients." The courthouse, once a place of judgment alone, had become a space of transformation. The scales of justice now balanced perfectly with the scales of opportunity, creating a recipe for change that would continue to impact lives for years to come.